After Jesus, his disciples, the big question, who do you say that I am? For the first time, he began telling them about his sufferings. I'm reading from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 9, verses 20 and 22, 20 to 22. He said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" Peter answered and said, "The Christ of God." And he strictly warned and commanded them to tell this to no one, saying, "The Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed and be raised the third day." This took place sometimes around the middle of Christ's ministry or somewhere around the middle of the gospel. And Jesus did not tell anything to his disciples about his sufferings prior to this, as it would have probably been too much for them to bear. But as his time was nearing, Christ at this point began talking about the sufferings that await him. Soon after this, at the Mount of Transfiguration, where Moses and Elijah appeared, they talked about Christ's sufferings with him. That was the only topic of conversation that's mentioned. Luke chapter 9, 29 to 31. As he prayed, the appearance of his face was altered, and his robe became white and glistening. And behold, two men talked with him, who were Moses and Elijah, who appeared in glory, and spoke of his decease, which he was about to accomplish at Jerusalem. Strange statement. His decease, which he was about to accomplish at Jerusalem. Decease is not something you accomplish usually, is it? It's something that happens to you. You die. You're deceased. This is really interesting because some Bible translations use the word decease. Other Bible translations use the word his departure. They talked about his departure, not about his decease. And what is fascinating is that here in Luke chapter 9, verse 31, the word that is translated as decease in some Bibles or departure in some other Bibles, the word to describe Christ's suffering, his experience in Jerusalem, the word is exodus, the Greek word exodus. And if it rings a bell, if it reminds you of something, you're right. The Greek word exodus means exodus. That's where the word exodus comes from. And guess where and when this word was first time used in the Bible? In the ancient Greek translation of the book of Exodus. Exodus chapter 9, Exodus chapter 19, verse 1, it reads, "In the third month, after the children of Israel had gone out of the land of Egypt, on the same day they came to the wilderness of Sinai." Gone out of Egypt. Gone out. That's one Greek word, exodus, used to describe the exodus out of Egypt. That's where you get the name for the whole book, from that word. So according to Moses and Elijah, what Christ was about to accomplish was an exodus, not decease. You don't accomplish your decease. That's something happens to you. Something you accomplish means you're achieving something. You're in charge of something. Christ was about to accomplish an exodus. Exodus out of where? Egypt? Babylon? No. Exodus out of this earthly kingdom below, the kingdom of darkness, pain, suffering, and death. He was to go out of this world of suffering and he was to ascend into his heavenly kingdom. That is what Luke tells us further on in the same chapter, Luke 9:51. Luke 9:51. Now it came to pass, when the time had come for him to be received up, that he steadfastly set his face to go to Jerusalem. The time has come for him to be received up. Jesus was to ascend and be received up into the heavenly kingdom. So this is what Moses and Elijah talked to Christ about on the Mount of Transfiguration. Christ's exodus. And in some way, his exodus was to encompass the experience of both Moses and Elijah. Of course, Moses was the one through whom God accomplished the original first exodus out of Egypt. He was the eyewitness of the first exodus. But after this, Moses died in the desert. And as the book of Jude tells us, his body was resurrected. Moses came back to life. And like Moses, Jesus also died. And he rose back to life, like Moses. Elijah did not experience death. He was received up into the heavens. He ascended into the heavens. And 40 days after his resurrection from the dead, Jesus also ascended and was received up into the heavens. So Christ accomplished both the exodus from the grave and the exodus from this whole world. Everything he accomplished was about leaving this life and this world behind. And this is why his disciples were bitterly disappointed, because their expectations were very, very different. For them, it was all about staying down here and making a name and fame for themselves in this kingdom below. And for the third time in this one chapter, same chapter, Luke chapter 9, for the third time, Christ spoke about his sufferings to his disciples, but they still did not get it. Luke 9, 43 to 46. And they were all amazed at the majesty of God. But while everyone marveled at all the things which Jesus said, he said to his disciples, "Let these words sink down into your ears. Let these words sink down into your ears, for the Son of Man is about to be betrayed into the hands of man." But they did not understand this saying, and it was hidden from them, so that they did not perceive it. And they're afraid to ask him about these sayings. Then a dispute arose among them as to which of them would be greatest. Let these words sink down into your ears. I'm telling you this for the third time in a very short period of time. I will be betrayed into the hands of man. But the words did not sink down into their ears. They just went out through the other ear. They did not understand it. It was hidden. They did not perceive it. And they were afraid to ask about it. They asked for explanations regarding his other sayings before, sayings they did not understand. But these things, he said, they were afraid to ask about it because they're probably subconsciously afraid of the answer. And we are all the same in this respect when it comes to the subject of suffering. We don't like to think about it. It is frightening. So the disciples turned to their preferred conversations and thoughts, and we are told that immediately after Jesus told them that he was about to be betrayed into human hands, immediately after this, they started arguing amongst them about who would be the greatest amongst them. Again, making a name and fame for themselves in this world, in this kingdom below. And again, we are all the same in this respect also. Building up success in this life and in this world. That is the purpose of life, after all. At least that's the gospel that this world preaches to us. And we believe it. We do believe it. We so do believe it, be it consciously or subconsciously. But what Jesus told his disciples for the third time in this chapter is that he is in direct conflict with this world, with this life, with the authorities of this world, and with everything this world stands for. He told them he was to be assailed by the elders, the chief priests, the scribes. He was to be handed over into the hands of the Gentiles, the Romans, and be killed. He was to be betrayed and given over into the hands of the rulers of this world. All those who in the end cooperate with the ruler of this world. And it all sounded very much like a defeat. And that is how Christ's sufferings are perceived when seen strictly through the physical eyes. He is seen as a victim who was defeated on the cross. But there was something more to it. He also told them that he would be raised up on the third day. And on the Mount of Transfiguration, there was a talk about his exodus from this place. But beneath the cross, all they could see was a defeat and a victim who was defeated. And sometimes Christ on the cross is presented as a victim. Was he? If you want to hear the full story of what took place on the cross, go to the playlist called Jesus on the Cross on this YouTube channel and listen to the presentations. As mentioned before, I would question the translations of the story of transfiguration of Christ that use the word decease to portray his experience in Jerusalem. Other Bibles translate this word as departure, which is much closer to the meaning of Exodus, meaning leaving a place or going out of a place. The bottom line is this word means Exodus, having a connotation and context of the Exodus from Egypt, which has a ring of victory to it. Unlike the word decease, which has a connotation and suggestion of defeat. After the Jewish authorities and the Roman authorities, all the authorities of this kingdom below that is ruled by the prince of this world, Satan, after this world threw everything it had on Christ, it still did not manage to defeat him and stop him. Even before the resurrection, he was victorious. On the cross, Christ was victorious against everything this world stands for. This world does not take kindly to the scandalous humility of the cross or Christ on the cross. In our very being, all of us have a natural hostility to the cross because it is in conflict with our nature. Each human being, with their deeply seated desire and need for self-preservation, self-promotion, and self-exaltation, is an affront to Christ crucified. We all tend to seek better and higher things in life, and this is the direction in which we all traverse. Up, up. Christ journeyed in the opposite direction, down, 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 as he descended from a higher plane, higher dimension, higher realm, into the lower regions of this flatland. And so he willingly imposed extreme limitations upon himself, suffering in the process. Everything this world stands for is in conflict, in enmity to the cross of Christ. This is so because behind the curtain, deep in the dark, there are invisible powers that are pulling strings, seeking to control this world by keeping it in darkness. But because he is the light of the world, Christ exposed the darkness on the cross. He unveiled the hidden things and he defeated the invisible forces of evil in the spiritual realm. He was not a victim on the cross. He was the victor. And of course, it is easy to say these things because these are hard to verify and prove, the invisible things. But just like in that story where Christ forgave the paralyzed man, which was very hard to verify, in order to prove that his sins were forgiven, Christ told the man, "Rise up and walk." And man did rise up and walk, this man. And so to prove that on the cross, he was victorious over this dark world and all its spiritual forces in it, Christ also rose and walked away and proved that he was the victor on the cross. So he made an exodus out of the grave, out of the pit of death. And eventually he made an exodus out of this dark world when he ascended into the heavens 40 days after his resurrection. While Christ was the mysterious suffering servant, strangely, through it all, he was the one who was in charge. He was the victor, not the victim. He was the victor. He was the suffering victor. And while these two words don't seem to go together, don't seem to make sense together, these actually accurately describe the person, the identity, and the mission of Christ. The suffering victor. In this world, victories are achieved by inflicting suffering upon others. Whether we speak of wars or sports or anything else, that is how this world functions. But Christ turned everything in this world upside down, and he achieved victory not by inflicting sufferings upon others, but by willingly taking the sufferings upon himself. Not just for the sake of it, for the pain of it, but in order to ultimately destroy all the sufferings. That was his goal, to be personally victorious over this world, over sin, over the devil, over the forces of evil, over suffering, and over death. In order to completely destroy and annihilate all these things in the end, once his mission is fully accomplished.